what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Greenwash, fuck your sponsors, fuck your dosh. Copenhagen is greenwash. Fuck your sponsors, fuck your dosh. Copenhagen is greenwash. Fuck your sponsors, fuck your dosh. Copenhagen is greenwash. Fuck your sponsors, fuck your dosh. Copenhagen is greenwash. Fuck your sponsors, fuck your dosh. Copenhagen is greenwash.
You know, as a matter of fact, there are institutions that says climate change is a business opportunity, which in fact it is a business opportunity also. And also other people, they just want to continue business as usual and trying to find some clever way to make other people believe that they are contributing to solve the climate change crisis. And then some of us feel that if we want to solve the climate change problem, we have to go to the roots of the problem. And that has to do with questioning a political and economic system that puts profits ahead of the environment and profits ahead of people.
We love green, but we love profit more. We say power shop, they say can't stop. We say power shop.
Cap and trade has all kinds of flaws, but one of them is the negotiating dynamic. What it ends up doing is putting nations and industries and regions in a competitive war over allocation of the remaining carbon that we can emit and maintain a planet that's livable. And as long as there's this planetary food fight going on, we won't reach any kind of usable agreement, and in fact the food fight will never end. Instead, as you might guess from the name of my organization, what I think we need to do is agree to price CO2 emissions. And I don't think we even need to agree internationally on the same price. If we set a price in a large block of countries, for example, the United States would be big enough to do that, or the European Union, other countries would have an incentive to do the same thing because of the World Trade Organization provisions that allow what's called a border tax adjustment. So for example, if the US were to impose a carbon tax, and what I'm talking about when I say a carbon tax is a tax on coal, oil, and natural gas at the first point of sale. A carbon tax, which could be harmonized internationally, would get us where we need to go without this bad dynamic that is a struggle over allowances and allocation and formulas, etc., that really will never reach an agreement.
We're selling dirty air, we buy clean air. Do we care if it works? No, we don't. You're invited to fund your favorite false solution. Come and fund agrofuels, come and fund nuclear, come and fund large dams, hydro, come on, CCS, we've got it all, we're selling it all.
With these solutions, what do we want? When do we want it? Are we willing to fight for it? Are we willing to fight for it?
I think the best outcome we can hope for is a stalemate, meaning no agreement, because if anything comes out by tomorrow, it's going to be really bad based on what we're seeing so far. So I think if it looks like a failure because of developed countries, I think that's the best outcome we can hope for, and then try to work for something better. But we have to be very careful about the spin around this, because they're going to say that either China or the G77 in China blocked progress.
James Hansen, who's the leading climate scientist at NASA, made a very strong statement in the international press where he said, I want these talks to fail. And he wanted them to fail because he could see no prospect that a strong agreement would be produced. And we've heard this from Polly as well. I have to say I'm inclining in that direction myself. Barring some thunderbolt miracle where Barack Obama is struck from on high by whatever divinity we choose to believe in, and suddenly he starts speaking in tongues and pouring from his mouth are all the things we would like to see in a climate agreement, including a declaration of planetary rights. Is the agreement going to be so bad that it's better not to have an agreement at all?
We must have the sense that the world's governments are committed to the 350 or whatever its science takes. We need that as a declaration at the very least, otherwise there isn't a foundation to move forward. If it's just shambolic and chaos as it is at the moment, it'll be too depressing and it won't form any sort of global mandate for the next steps.
I sympathize with that, but the problem with all these good intentions is that if we have something on paper, people tend to become complacent. They say, oh wow, we formulated this, it's a great document, like Kyoto in one way, full of good intentions and nothing's really coming out of it. We need something that actually makes us or empowers us to change our ways.
The Nations is violating their own laws, the Geneva Convention, the Aarhus Convention, and God knows how many conventions they have signed and promoted in the past, and now they are violating their conventions. It is the United Nations that is excluding dissenting voices to the process.
We need a change in the model of civilization. Actually, we need a change in the model of production and consumption.
With the reductions they proposed to get to 2 degrees, so the 25 to 40% below 1990, which is now based on old science and was already conservative to begin with, that still leaves us with a 50-50 chance of overshooting 2 degrees. And the Africa group, actually, the bloc of African countries in the negotiations has been very strong in saying for them 2 degrees is suicide, because 2 degrees global increase is actually 3.5 degrees in most of Africa. And even then, when like the EU or the US or Australia or whichever developed country talks about 2 degrees, they're talking about it on paper. So it's going to be achieved with billions and trillions of tons of offsets and tons of loopholes and people getting money to do things that aren't even real. So their 2 degrees isn't actually really 2 degrees, it's more than 2 degrees.
Whereas those who might invest in the future in renewables, if the price is right and if the market conditions are correct, have a much less powerful interest because they don't actually have anything to defend at the moment. They're not going to lose their livelihood if renewables don't take off. They might not just be able to exploit new opportunities. And while there is no overall limit on the amount of fossil fuel that is extracted, that extraction continues to undermine all the other goals which have been expressed by the Conference of the Parties. And it's extremely hard to limit demand if you're not limiting supply, because the price of fossil fuels remains very low. That undermines the alternatives, that creates a very major incentive to not to move out of them as far as the remainder of the economy is concerned. So my 2 proposals, which I really beg people to take up for what a good climate agreement would contain: leave trees standing and leave fossil fuels in the ground.
So stunned and disappointed about the failure, about everything what is going on here in the Bella Center. And that's why we are going to shave our heads tomorrow morning in front of the Bella Center. And we are realizing that we are not going to achieve anything with action and with crying and shouting. And so we said, okay, we have to do something else, but we want to express our disappointment, our anger, and our fear as well. And that's why we are going to shave our heads. And I have some information here, and I will put it somewhere there on the table.